where you know that medication, constant medication could help. For sickle cell disease, it is not. You always have to observe the child, know the child, knowing also very well that the extreme of anything could trigger a crisis. If the child is, the person is overexcited, that is, it could trigger a crisis. If the child is anxious, very stressed out, it is also going to trigger a crisis. So it didn't just.
So it means that you are also monitoring his moods. You also have to be monitoring his moods.
You have to. And like Doreen said, sometimes they try to hide the pain because they think that they are overburdening you, they are worrying you. And the moment he gets into crisis, everybody is on alert. Everybody is, I have had to, when I decided that, look, whatever it was, I was going to go to school, I had to write some of my exams from Kolebu, preparing from Kolebu. You go for lectures, you close, you get somebody to take care of him at the hospital for you. When you are done, you rush home to go and check on the other ones, and then you rush back. So 10 p.m. you are now driving from Adenta to Kolebu just to go and make sure that. And unfortunately, our healthcare system hasn't been that pleasant and convenient. And so sometimes, and I don't blame the facility, you only blame the conditions. Sometimes we've had times that I've had to carry him in a chair like this so that he will get the transfusion, or they will give him the infusion. So when he became a little bit older and aware, he didn't really want to go to Kolebu, because he would tell you that, look, mommy, I don't want you to go and sleep on the floor, because you can't leave him to go and stay in the mother's hostel. So you use a cardboard or a mat. If you are lucky and you have a car, you can bring a student's mattress to come and lie by his bed. And then by 4 a.m., you have to get up and send the mattress to your car and come and get him ready for the morning ward rounds. And so these are some of the things. But like Doreen said, the joy is that he would tell you, and one of the things that he's best remembered at the pediatric ward of Kolebu is that when he comes in, he is helpless. But the moment he is well, they'll tell you that you see that the class prefect is around. He will get down, be walking around, go to the toys room, be organizing the toys to make sure, and then he will be telling the children, don't do this, you can't touch this one, you have to use, and that is him. Yeah. That is how they are. And they know that they are vulnerable, and so when they have the energy, they want to use it.
How old is he now?
Thankfully, he's 16.
Wow.
He celebrated his 16th birthday, I think, on the 15th of June. You should see him.
I think the last time I saw him, he was taller than me. I didn't even recognize him. I turned back to...
He's tall and he's in SHS1. And
have you had recent crisis? How is he? As he's going, how has it been?
Well, so when age 8, eventually thankfully I had interactions with the late Professor Konote Ahulu and the late Professor Ohene Frimpong. It was Professor Ohene Frimpong who recommended at age 4, his spleen was not functioning, and the option was for us to have a surgery to remove the spleen. Green as I was, I didn't know what it was, so I was looking for medical advice, professional advice, and it was Professor Ohene Frimpong who at that time recommended that I allow him to undergo the surgery. So they took out the spleen, because what the spleen was doing, that the spleen is a part or a body part, an organ that receives blood, sieves the waste from the blood, and then recirculates the blood through the body. But what the spleen was doing was that when it receives the blood, it stores it. It was not functioning and performing the role that it was supposed to be performing. And that is how come every now and then he was having problems with the blood level, and he had to undergo several transfusions. And then at age 6, Professor Ohene Frimpong recommended that we give him the wonder drug. We call it the wonder drug for SCD warriors, the hydroxyurea. But at that time, Kolebu said they hadn't finished with their clinicals, and so they were not administering the drug to children until that close shave of having to go to to have the scan for them to know that the blood was thickening and there was no proper oxygen flow to the brain. And so we went through counseling and we were told that we either have to go through the hydroxyurea for a while. After a while, they'll run the test. If the body was not adjusting to the medication, what it meant was that they would take him off it, and then every month you walk in for blood transfusion. And it was something that all of us were not comfortable with. Thankfully, the drug is working, and so I can say that for the past 8 years, he's not had major crisis. I mean, if you see him in a crisis, it means that he hasn't done what he needs to do, or he has overexerted himself. For instance, he wrote his BEC through crisis. And the sad thing was that he didn't want us to tell him to stop the exam. He didn't want us to be unduly worried. So he kept the pain to himself.
Wow.
Yes. But thankfully, he is better now.
So you've done Kolebu for 16 years?
Yes. And we are still doing Kolebu.
God is our strength.
He is.
Amen. Yeah.
Ms. Amon, do you sometimes blame your parents because for the pain that you had to see your siblings suffer? Did you at any point blame them for not knowing or not doing the right thing?
Yes, to some extent I blame them because if they didn't know at first, if they didn't know before they had my big sister, the eldest one, who we lost at age 54, some 7 years ago, that should have prompted them to make more informed choices. Because as I said earlier, it could have been me, it could have been any of my other siblings. So we lost Mami Edna, my eldest sister, and now Mami Jane, the second one, who is SS, is 50. She's going to be 58 July 15th. It has not been easy for all family members. It has been anxiety, emotionally draining, fear, mixed feelings. My mother passed on at the age of 54. She was AS. It had nothing to do with AS. She had high blood pressure. Somehow, I think that the stress that she went through taking care of them could have been a contributory factor, because how could she have taken a rest? That is not possible. So yes.
So was there any point that the two of them were having crisis at the same time?
Many times. So many times my siblings will be in the hospital at the same time. If not the same time, when one gets okay, it's
running a shift,
then the other one kicks in, and then the same routine is repeated. With my eldest sister, Mami Edna, her condition influenced the career that she chose. She was a nurse, and she was a staff nurse midwife in a hospital in the UK before she passed on. Before she passed on, she couldn't go to work. She had many complications. Her kidney, I can't leave out any organ. Everything was affected, and then sadly she passed on, leaving my sister Jane. So you know what that does. If you have a sister who is SS, who passes on, and then you have one other sister,
it's like you are waiting,
who is SS, you are always on the edge. It's not an easy thing, not at all. My sister Jane is a catering officer. She went into catering. She, like I said, she was very hardworking. When Rosen said they like to use their energy when they have it, that's her. She would work so hard. If she was the best employee at a company where the employer told her that if I knew you were a sickle cell patient, I would not have employed you. Yet, she went on to become the best employee that company had had. Her working life has been interspersed with crisis, and this is something that really gets to her because, like I said, she's a very hardworking person. She feels very strongly about stigmatization. She says that sickle cell patients are stigmatized. They are discriminated against because at one company where she worked, where everybody would remember her when there's work, that same company did not allow her to take advantage of the opportunity of going for further training at a hotel in the UK because, as they put it, they cannot be sure what will happen to her there. And that is one of the pains she has borne up to now. She always talks about it. Yes. So stigmatization is something that is of great concern to her. Yes. And then in relation to stigmatization, I don't know where the term came from, whether it was derived from the name sickle, like sickle cell disease. So sickler, people will say. And once they hear you are SS and they say, oh, he's a sickler, then it is, oh, you are even lucky that she's still alive because they die early. Yeah, that may be true, but that should not deny her entitlements, her rights, or any opportunities that she needs to have. Unfortunately, that has not been the case.
If you just joined us, we are sharing the experiences of caregivers of people with sickle cell disease. One of my guests is a mother. One of my guests is a mother, and my boss, Miss Hammond, also has siblings who had sickle cell disease. Auntie Rose, you mentioned earlier that one of your children is AS and one is AE. So you got one AS, one AE, one SS. Wow. Okay. So have you had any conversation, especially the one who is AS, have you had conversations with them about choosing life partners?
Yes, I mean, I happen to be the second of 9 siblings, 9 children, and so for me, once we were old enough, we had honest conversations, and all my other siblings had to undergo the test to know their their genotype. And for my children, because everything that happened in their presence.
And
They
they
were
were
the
young.
older ones,
Yeah.
but they knew the number of times that we had to go and sleep at the hospital and everything, and so they are aware. So we've had honest conversations. Thankfully, they were all science students, and so they have also gone on to read about it. But I have told them what it means. We've had honest conversations, the do's and don'ts. I mean, why I wouldn't encourage anybody to go in with a partner that has AS or AC, because what it means is that there's always a 50-50 chance of having a child with sickle cell.
One of them is AA, so
Yes.
she
I mean,
is.
she is okay, but even that, I always say that look, if you can,
So who should marry the AS people? This one there, which they to this one
I'm not
demonstration.
discriminating. I mean, these are conversations that I've had with other sickle cell warriors and all that. Look, I have a sickle cell warrior. She's the last of 6 children, and like Doreen said, anytime she goes into crisis, she says her parents were selfish. She would turn her frustration and anger on her parents because she said, look, well, and the parents said, we didn't even know anything called sickle cell until you came along. So you can't blame us. Because she said, look, why did you have, after 5 children, you wanted to have a 6th one, and you had me, and I ended up being the one to bear everybody's sickle gene. And so these are the frustrations, and it's genuine. If you wouldn't want to witness somebody who has crisis. You can't sleep. I mean, when somebody has headache, you give the person medication, and you probably could put a cold towel on the head, and the person probably may doze off to sleep, and that will go. For sickle cell crisis, like Doreen said earlier, you are not able to do anything. You are helpless because it doesn't matter what medication you give. You can't soothe the pain of that person. The back, the joints, they are unable to eat, they are unable to drink water, and that is how come in recent times in modern medicine, when it happens, the only thing you can do is to send them to the hospital for them to have the transfusion, because through that they are able to infuse, and for some strange reason, anytime they go into crisis, all their veins shut down. So it is even a problem having a vein to be able to set a line for them to have the transfusion. Look, we've had it on the head, at the back of the neck, on the leg, anywhere they will find the slightest vein. And so it's not easy, but we've had that conversation, and I've told them, much as you can love anyone, I think that what we haven't done, I mean, in my master's thesis, I did something about sickle cell and its awareness. And I went to Tamale, I went to Konfanoche, and I did Kwalebu. 85% of the people who have children with sickle cell disease did not even know about the condition until their children were diagnosed. That is how, as a nation, we have failed. For maybe we have probably done the statistics. Every year, 20,000 children are born with sickle cell disease. Every year, 20,000 children are born, even despite all the efforts that Professor Ohene Frimpong did. That is how we get the numbers now, because now there is screening at birth. Yeah. And so you can imagine those times where people were not being screened, and so you don't know your genotype. You are there, you meet somebody, you fall in love with the person. I mean, there are medical doctors who know their genotype, but they go ahead and marry. When the problem comes, it is faith, and they are saying it's faith and advanced medicine. There are several other interventions, but there is not, 90% of it does not work. They do bone marrow transplants, they do stem cell, all the advanced medical interventions that you can think of. Some of them is just like every other medical surgery that you do. It is always a 50-50 chance. And so why would you want to saddle yourself? And if people don't know, it is costly. It is costly to have a child with sickle cell. Look, the medication, assuming you are able to get the medication, if you are lucky to have the hydroxyurea and everything else, every month you need to go and do a lab test. Apart from the lab test, you have to get the routine drugs monthly. Hydroxyurea somehow is covered by health insurance, but 80% of the time we buy, because you go and the health insurance service provider will tell you that we have run out of medication.
And
You
need it.
Yes, and you need to pay attention to what they eat. You can't just give them anything. So you have to make sure that their diet is always balanced. They are eating so it is, you can imagine the poor people. I met somebody at Kolebu who has 3 children, all of them are. And they didn't know until the children were all diagnosed. And so I always say that, look, why can't we step up the education, the awareness, and leave people to make their choices? Because at the end of the day, why would you want to be saddled with something that becomes your lifelong responsibility, and you don't even know what
Perpetual pain.
Yes, and so for me, I have told them, and I have always told them that, look, while I will not stand in the way, be ready to go through the repercussions of your actions, because you have seen me. I should be an example. And I always say that probably it's a good thing God gave me my last born as that, because if the first one had come and I probably may not have had any other children, because I didn't want to risk it.
Mr. Mon, did you consider the sickling status of your partner? Was it something that you had in mind as a young girl? You know, when someone proposes, you say, okay, let me see your sickling status.
Very much aware, because I'm very much aware, and then I ensured. There's no one in our family, not even our children, who do not know about the details of this sickle cell disease and how to prevent it, because we are a very close-knit family. So everyone's problem is another one's problem, and we all go through it. That's how we cope. So everything that happens, they have been witnesses, they have been involved, hospital visits, they have been involved, going to buy medication, they have been involved. So the conversation for me was very easy, because they've seen it.
So when you are dating, at what stage do you start talking about what's your sickle cell, or what's your status? At what stage how cautious were you? Because clearly you can't tell someone's status just by looking at the person.
Very interesting, because you said when you were dating, at which point then you even start the issue of body count, isn't it? Anyway,
that's another conversation.
So before I got married, I luckily my first husband was a doctor, so he knew about it also, and he was AA, so that wasn't. But with my partner now, we had to check, and we checked. Yes, and he didn't have any problem with us checking. And our children, my siblings, their children, they know about it. They are very much aware. So it is something that they are guarding against.
This one is a question I'll take views from both of you. So one of the things that you commonly hear is there's medicine, there's faith. People said that they were SS, and when they prayed or they drank a certain portion, they came to check.
Let me answer
and
that.
Now they are.
Let me answer that. When it comes to the sickle cell disease, there's nothing like Nyamibeye. Nyamibeye would help you cope to a point, but it will not change the genotype. It will not change SS to AA. It will not change. It will just help you to psychologically cope. The financial burden, as Roslyn said, is being enormous. I can't even describe it. But luckily, I've had siblings. My 2 other sisters, Anita and Susie, they have been amazing. Everything they have. I don't have much, but
please stop under declaring your assets on national
I
television.
don't have much, but I am so grateful to them, Anita and Susie, the kind of help they have given financially. at the moment, she has mobility issues. She's in a wheelchair. She has a 24-hour nurse. That's what she's going through. And that's 170 cedis a day. She has 3 sessions of physiotherapy. 1 session, 3 sessions of physiotherapy a week. And that's 350 cedis per session. We haven't spoken about her medications. We've not spoken about her admission fees, the procedures, scans, x-rays, everything that you can think of. With you being anxious and asking yourself, is there something I can do better? Oftentimes, some churches are doing very well. When it's time for couple counseling, they ask that the couples do a number of tests. But in respect to sickle cell, but most churches are more concerned about HIV. You can test for HIV. You could be negative today, and tomorrow you would be positive. With sickle cell, it doesn't change. So the emphasis should be on checking the genotype, the sickling test. When you test and it is even positive, I don't think that you should even go forward to see whether it is a milder or because you never know. It's not advisable to do that. See, it's like let me put it this way, like a death sentence. Like you are on death row. You don't know if you are going today, tomorrow, or the next. And for family members, it's traumatizing. The emotional roller coaster
you can
that
imagine
you
what
go
the
through.
people themselves experience.
So yes, so you can imagine what the people themselves, I mean the patient herself experiences, especially for someone who is used or prefers doing things for herself, now having to depend on others to do things for her. It's such a, and she, when Rosalind was saying he doesn't like going to the hospital because he feels that his mom will be uncomfortable. That's my sister for you. She's always thinking about how others will feel, and sometimes she tries to hold it all in because of how others around her would feel. But many times too, it's been tears, it's been pain. This is not something that you can wish for your worst enemy. So by all means, prevention we must, and more education must go on. We must intensify education to make people know the kind of choices that they make.
You were asking about faith.
Yes.
But for faith, we wouldn't have been here on this journey, because your faith holds you up and you hope that he would be an exception to the rule of all the things that come with sickle cell. But you also need to be wise and use the wisdom and opportunity God has given us through medicine. One of the times that we went to Kolebu, we had a man who brought in his 10-year-old son. And I mean, the boy was diminutive. I was looking at him at 10 years and I was comparing him to my son at 6 years. And my son was, I called him Adam. Adam was looking far bigger than him. And, you know, we were both at the emergency unit. And he had the photo of somebody who was apparently his religious leader. And he had it hidden in his shirt. So
Is it the parents who had it or the boy? It was
The parents.
Okay.
And they had been referred from a village in the Somanya area, in the eastern region, let me say that. And every now and then, when nobody was watching, he would just bring the picture and put it on the child from head to toe. Meanwhile, the child was writhing in pain and he was screaming. So I asked him, what is it that you are doing? Then he said, oh, nyami nipa se memfa we ne ento so na ebeye yi. And I told him that no, because here he was, he didn't even have money for the primary painkiller that had been prescribed for him. So I had to tell the nurses to use some of my son's own for him so that eventually we could see what we would do. So these are the things. I mean, imagine holding your plump 4-month-old baby. You have gone to see your doctor on a routine checkup, pediatric appointment. And then before 12 noon, you are told that you'll be lucky to have your son live beyond 4 years. Which mother can take that?
No.
When we had the surgery, the next 24 hours, we were told that the next 72 hours was crucial. The next day after the surgery, he was running a temperature that nothing could control. So the nurses would come and help us. We would sponge him down because water was not supposed to go through the wounds. And so they will hold him up like you are holding a ladder. You wash the feet, you sponge the feet, and then the other people will turn and then they sponge him upwards towards the head. If you don't have that faith, I mean, we've had stories of people who have run away and abandoned their children because they didn't have what it takes. They were scared. They didn't know what was going to become of their children and all that. For me, my faith has helped me has helped, in fact, the whole family to go through it and to this point, hoping that every day God will perform his miracle of keeping him alive, because we can't change the situation. But that doesn't also mean that I will abandon the medical things that we need to do for him. Because I remember.
Have someone told you they know a place, they have medicine, they have...
Yes.
Because it's a long journey that you've been on.
Of course. I mean, I hardly tell people who, unless you are very close to us, you wouldn't know. Because you also need to see my son and see him in his crisis mood before you know that he's a sickle cell warrior. But otherwise, you wouldn't know. But those that I have gone on to confide in, they've told me, oh, somebody came and said we should go and see a lot of herbalists. I mean, it's always herbalist, or we should go for prayer camps, we should do this, we should do that. And I told them that, look, my faith is enough. My belief in God and my own prayers, I think that I have a group of people who would always be interceding for me, and that for me is enough. If God wants him to live, he has a word. But there have been times that he's gone into those worst moments of crisis that you ask yourself, is this the end? Is this how it is going to end?
Yeah. The more you know about the disease, the more you become anxious. In February, my sister's HB went to as low as 3.5. And because I know what that means, you should have been there to see how I was. Thankfully, no, she once she knows this is what is going to help me,
she'll go for it.
We were in the hospital and she had been discharged with an HB of 3.5, and I said, no, thank God. Along this journey, there have been very amazing and wonderful people who help out. Doctors, nurses. In relation to this, we had been discharged from a hospital and her HB was 3.5. And I called Dr. Obed Babington, Accra Medical Center, and he says, bring her now.
Was it like sort of discharge that they had in mind? Because how do you discharge someone with an HB of 3.5?
I have been seeking answers, but at a point I told myself, let me concentrate on the needful. That is taking better care of my sister. And then when things are a little cool, I will go pursuing that matter. We got to AMC, Dr. Babington and his team, the nurses, everybody, transfusions, infusions, all the shins you can imagine. And then infections. One antibiotic after the other. So at a point I asked Dr. Babington, is her body producing the infections? And then he said, no, but sickle cell patients are very vulnerable to infections. So that's why she's having this recurrent. But she pulled through with help, and now she's wheelchair bound, still in pain. Most of her time in the wheelchair is
Wow.
spent in pain. She eats while she's in pain.
Are you able to provide her some sort of psychological, because for such a person, it's just pain?
Yes.
In her alone moments, what kind of support are you able to provide for her?
The psychological help has not benefited only my sister, but all of us, because you see that when you see what she's going through, you are also psychologically affected. Now she is able to make calls. As soon as I hear the phone ring coming from her, then I become very jittery, very apprehensive. So we've all benefited from that. But to what extent will that help when you see your sister constantly in pain, when you see her in tears, and when she is still in pain? How helpful can the psychological help be? It can only be to some extent.
Rose, your son is younger. As a mother, aside, I'd ask you the same question. How are you able to support him? Because going to school, you mentioned that even when he was writing BC, he was in crisis. So he had an episode. So throughout his years, how are you able to manage, because school children too are very funny in a not so funny way. They'll call names. He looks well. Even luckily for him, I've seen him. He doesn't have the typical features that some of them may have. So, but how are you able to tell him to manage his emotions and everything?
So thankfully, he doesn't remember anything that happened to him between the ages of 1 to 8. He only remembers the pain and the regular visits to the hospital, but he doesn't even remember the intensity of the pains that he had to deal with. Now he is a bit more matured, and so I have told him to listen to his body and know when the pain is coming and know when to slow down. We made school authorities aware, but we also ensured that he led a normal life whilst he was in primary and JHS. In fact, until JHS 1, going on JHS 2, most of his colleagues, classmates didn't know. The only time they got to know was an international agency came on to have a feature on him, and they needed to go to the school to take him engaged in school activities. That was when, because at that time we tried to engage the school to even set an advocacy and all that, but the school were not very receptive to it. I asked him, so following that, I asked him, he didn't want the school bit. So I asked him why not, and he said he didn't want people to feel that he was a sick person, and that instead of empathizing, they would rather become sympathetic, or they will avoid him. And so afterwards, I told him, I asked him, I tried to engage him, and he said thankfully his friends hadn't, and that they were trying to find out how they would rather help with the advocacy and all that. But as he grows older, we live in a, I mean, amongst our family members, the extended family people who do not know, you know, people are, you want him to do the normal chores and they, you want them to go out and you want him to join. Debbie, don't let him go. We don't want to go and saddle ourselves with any. And so those are the things. But I have told him that, look, you are fortunate, you are better. You can do things on your own. And so you need to take it a day at a time. But be prepared to have some of these things. But if you are me as a parent and as a caregiver, my fears are ahead of me, because I am looking at when he is older and we have to leave the pediatric care for medical attention and migrate into
To the
the
adult
adult clinic. Many of the caregivers there, professional caregivers there, are not as accommodating as those in the pediatric unit. We may not be able to see him through private hospital. So it means that he would have to go to a public health facility. Those are the challenges. But with regards to him, I mean, we've sat down to read the basics about the do's and don'ts of sickle cell and everything. So sometimes you'll be there and then he will call you. I'm reporting myself and I'll ask, what is it? Today I didn't take the amount of water that I had to take. So I'm feeling funny. And I said, well, so do the needful. Drink a lot of water and rest. Whatever it is that you need to do, stop it and rest. Listen to your body more often and do that. But we are always trying to psych him up. And I tell him that it could be worse. You would be lucky to enjoy God's grace and you live a normal life. Because the life of a sickle cell patient, I mean, look at the amount of medication that you need to do. So whilst we are fighting the physical pain, the psychological and the emotional stress, you are also getting worried about the internal organs, because too much medication could also affect your internal organs. So this is the reality that we live with. But when you have, I say that we are fortunate, we are lucky, because anytime you see something happen to a warrior, you know that it could have been you. And so you always make sure that instead of making him look on the downside of things, you try to also keep him on the positive, because being so down could also trigger a mental issue, a psychological problem. And so even when he's not, he feels he has that problem. And so we are trying to balance the
Find a
equation.
balance. All right. So this is my final question to both of you. So we had this conversation not because we just want to share stories. I've been trying to avoid your eyes, because at a point I could pick tears here and there. And when we start the crying competition, I may win. Okay, so and what would you say? You've had very close contact with people who have gone through all this pain. What would you say to young people, especially, people who are unmarried, people who don't know what their status is, even as we talk now? What would you say to them?
I would say that testing to know your genotype is something that you should not compromise. It's very, very, very critical. Very, very critical, because no matter what, like I said, if you are SS, it can't change. That's it. It's a lifelong condition that cannot be changed, no matter. My sister has a food and beverage manager. She's very religious with taking in fluids, folic acid, her diet, very conscious about what she does and all. But that has not resulted in situations where she doesn't have crisis. So that is what I want to tell young people. It is very, very important. by all means, if you want to go into a relationship, you must know what you are getting into in respect of testing for the disease. Yes, that is what I would like to say. And for others, I would say you need to do things intentionally so that you do not stigmatize sickle cell patients. It is not their fault at all that they were born patients of the sickle cell disease.
I think Doreen has already said it. I will just, for emphasis sake, say that look, know your genotype, know your blood group. I mean, it's not for nothing that we live in a modern world where technology is advanced. We can forgive our parents and our grandparents for bringing us on this journey because at that time, nobody knew about it. And if I should share Professor Onyefimpong's story, he said it was when an auntie and an uncle of his in Kukwentumi started falling ill frequently. That was when he got the opportunity. When he got the opportunity, he decided that he wanted to be a medical doctor. And that was the start of the journey. Knowing it, he himself knowing it, did not spare him from having a child with sickle cell. He had 2 children. His son was sickle cell. The son died. And so this is a reality. But modern day medicine and technology makes it possible. It's not something that you can run away. I mean, you can hide. It's not a stigma. You walk into any lab test and say that, look, I want to know my genotype. I want to know my blood group. They will do it for you. And once you know it, keep it at the back of your mind. Let it be part of the conversation. When you meet a friend, you talk about a lot of things. You can quickly, so talk about health. Hey, COVID came, so did you ever have COVID? No. Hey, but do you also know about sickle cell? Because there are people who are even diabetic, who sometimes do not know until they are diagnosed. These are all things that will have an impact on the relationship. Because you did not, when you are going into relationships, you don't bargain, you don't go in for sickness too. In the past, we would say that those sickness is for old age, accidents, and those things. But now it is a reality. So have an open and honest conversation about it. It's better for you to know, and then you decide that I still want it anyway, than going and then you don't know. Because the thing is that if you are not strong and you are not committed, this disease could impact the relationship. It could impact, and the harm could have been done already because you
I think that for Caleb's story, the marriage is no longer.
You have a child, and then you realize that this is what it is, and so you now want to walk away from the relationship because you also don't want to be saddled with more children, likely saddled with more children who have it. But now you can avoid that situation. You may love the person, but I'm saying that sometimes even what we say love at first sight I don't know how you call it, but it's not
infatuation.
Love. Yes, it's not love. Love grows and develops. I mean, save yourself the trouble of the emotional, because anytime a loved one goes into crisis, you are there. And then apart from that, emotionally and psychologically, you are also losing because you now start to have the blame game. If I had known. And then to top that, is this what is going to kill my loved one? So save yourself that trauma. Be part of it. Know your status right now. And then live with it. Have that conversation. Even if you do and you decide that, look, we don't mind. We still want to go ahead and have it. You go in and with the knowledge that, okay, we are going to do the lottery. Maybe the first one will be AA. The second, because there are people who do that. People who think that, as for me, my faith is so strong. I believe in God so much so that I know that He will not let us have it. This is maybe the person has waited after 33 years. she has found somebody, and you are now coming to talk about genotype and blood test and those things. These are the things. But for me, I say that if you can, spare yourself that trouble.
If you can spare yourself that trouble, coming from someone who has lived 16 years of her life as a caregiver. So imagine taking your child every time to the hospital because of a situation that you could have prevented. And so that's how we end today's conversation. So we had this conversation today, and someone will say it's in July. Sickle cell awareness is usually in June, but sickle cell crisis or episode don't only occur in June. And so we continue with our awareness, we continue to educate people, especially people who haven't found life partners yet, to know their genotype. So that's why we keep these conversations going. Before I wrap up, this week hasn't been too good for us here at the Graphic Communications Group. One of our team members at the editorial unit. So if you read Daily Graphic, he's a lead designer and is usually responsible almost every time. 3 out of 4 days or 4 out of the number of publications we do, 70% of the time, he designs the front page and most of the key pages. We lost our colleague over the weekend, Felix Odromante, whom we all call as Bongo. And there are names. People call him different names because he's a people's person. I'd want to read a short message from his team leader as we pay a tribute to Bongo. It says, Graphic Mons Bongo. We miss your calm presence, quiet humor, steady hands, and creative mind. You showed up, gave your best. We saw and we felt it. We are better for having worked with you, and we miss you more than words can say. You may be gone, but you'll always be part of us. Rest of Bongo. Bongo, wherever you are, everyone misses you in the newsroom, and we pray God gives you rest. Sorry we had to do this, but thank you for joining us on this conversation. We'll come your way another time. Thank you.